Hi, everybody. So, so that was really a fantastic concert. Um, really amazing chorus. Great to hear your piece, Kyle. And Donald, I first wanted to talk to you about the chorus. I mean, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we went through Network of New Music. I sort of got to know the Crossing. And then ever since then, I think wherever I go, I see the Crossing. As a matter of fact, and in unusual places, as a matter of fact, I was at Lincoln Center, and they were walking through the reflecting pool in this John Luther Adams piece, and you've been with the ACO, and you've been on the West Coast. So can you tell us a little bit just about the genesis of the group and what you've been doing? And because it's unusual, there are not many, how many choruses in America that are dedicated to new music? It's pretty rare.
Two.
Two. The one West Coast?
Yeah. The one on the West Coast, yeah. Actually, C4, I think you could include in that too, so that's three. In 2000, so I'll make this as short as possible. The history of the last 8 years in 2 minutes. I had been in Philadelphia for a long time with St. Mark's Church, which is a professional Anglo-Catholic choir, and the Opera Company Chorus, and Choral Art Society, where I see two members of the Choral Society sitting right here now, and various other things throughout the time that I lived in Philadelphia. And I moved to Wales to work at Welsh National Opera, and I was back and bemoaning everything that there was to bemoan about Wales, the weather and the schedule and et cetera. And we decided we would put on a concert just because we really missed the kind of music making, and I was only doing opera, and I was used to doing all these kinds of other things, and so we decided we'd kind of just for the kicks, do it, and we put it on, and the press wrote an article before it, and the press wrote an article after it, and all of a sudden we had a group, and we thought, well, we'll try it again next year, and a year later we came back into two, and I think it was in that second year that we said we're really only going to do exactly what we want to do, because we didn't really care whether we became the Robert Shaw Chorale or whether we remained the Unknown Crossing or whatever. It didn't matter to us, So we were going to do just what we wanted to do, which is new music. And of course, when you go to school, they teach you that you can't possibly do that. You have to do the Mozart Requiem and then stick a little piece on the front of it and call that your new music. Well, you know what? They're wrong. They are completely wrong. And I'm really blessed with the fact that now I teach at Northwestern when I'm not in Philadelphia, and I'm able to kind of pass on the fact that that's a big myth, and you should go out and start your choir and do whatever you want.
Sure, and I mean, actually, this is an audience you're preaching to some extent to the converted, because actually, over the years, myself and Derek before me programmed largely new music, where it's almost reversed. It's the one piece of Brahms and so on, and which is great. And it's absolutely, there's so many people, particularly like in orchestral world, they really think if they program new music, people are going to run away, and it's just so not true. I
mean, next year we're doing a big piece of Buxtehude as a part of a huge commissioning project that involves 7 composers from all over the world, and I won't go into it, but it is around Buxtehude's Member Jesu Nostri. So we're singing Buxtehude's Member Jesu Nostri, and at the minute I mention that, you get these raised eyebrows, like, as if I was, it was 100 years ago and you were saying Schoenberg, so.
Exactly. One thing I found that was remarkable going to the Crossing concerts is that the audience is a mix of all these things I'm used to going to hearing my piece on contemporary music concerts, and you see other composers there. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting another composer and say, oh yeah, all these people. But at the Crossing concerts, well, you've got the new music geeks who are there. You've got choral geeks who just love choral music, and they show up and they just sing in an amateur choir or whatever. And there's a choir in town. I'll go to that. And then you have like artists, and just people who like something different, and people who just like read books, and because you do things like very interesting literature, and they're all in this together. So it's not like a new music crowd; it's it's almost like a new audience that you've created, but they were there all the time,
which is great, obviously. And of course, part of doing new music is also doing new pieces, and you commission a lot of pieces and do premieres quite a lot, right? And now, you've done pieces before this together too?
Oh my goodness, he's the unofficial composer.
You're the court composer or something?
I hope I've helped to pay his mortgage for a little while. Actually, that's not true. You know, it's Kyle's been very generous, but we've gone through. Well, why don't you tell them what we've gone through?
Well,
Not emotionally, just musically.
the first thing we did together was the Vespers, and it was a Pifaro, the Renaissance band. It was their project, and they got me and they got Donald and the Crossing and put us together, and so that was where where all that started, and ever since then they've been asking me for pieces, so I've done a few things for them. Yeah.
And in this case, in the notes at least, it mentioned that you came to him, you sort of had the idea for using the text from the Apollo. And so how did that work, that sort of collaboration work?
Well, Donald had the idea of the astronaut's transcript, and as I said, I mean, I really did immediately fall in love with it, which does not always happen. I'm very persnickety about texts. I love words, and I love setting them. It may be my first love in music, I think, and so I fell in love with that idea, and the idea of them coming around, and even just, it's not only prose, but it's really prosaic prose. You know, it's just guys talking, and bring it up. Are we there yet? Y'all right? I love y'all. What a great, what a great word. And but it took a while because we had some other things that we were looking at. There's a lot of romantic poetry, and so I had to go through all of that. A big problem to me, or a challenge, was not in setting the astronauts. It was because I wanted to, but how I was going to do it. I really didn't want to do some technical things with the voices, where the really coolest thing would be just to have the people go, you know, which I just love. I love that sound, you know, but, you know, 35 minutes of probably would not have gone over.
You never know.
And I thought of using the percussion in different ways, and so I ended up doing with what I ended up with was the sopranos giving just a halo of a sound, and splitting up the voices so that they were all singing very lyrical stuff. I like to write lyrically, but it was split up. Sometimes they were strict canons, sometimes not. Sometimes they go into unison, sometimes not. So you get this fuzziness in the voices all the time, and that's what. But the original genesis of the piece was Donald's idea of that transcript.
So I want to interject two things here. So Kyle saved the piece, even though it was his piece. He saved the piece in two ways. One was my original idea was that it was going to be about all the wonderful things that happened in the week before Christmas, throughout history, and the week after Christmas, and all the terrible things that happened. And then that kind of got expanded, and it was going to, you know, and I sent him all these texts about all these terrible things that human beings do, and this kind of balance of, you know, isn't it incredible what we can do? Isn't it awful what we do? You know, that was sort of where I was on Christmas Day a year ago. I, by the way, ruined Christmas Day by reading the entire transcript from beginning to end of like days and days and days of the astronauts talking to each other. But the other thing is that...
And then I read it.
And then he read it. But the thing that's really interesting also about us knowing each other as well as we do is that, and I don't believe I ever mentioned this, was what I really loved about the transcript was, in fact, as he said, it goes, you know, turn it right, turn it left. They're trying to get a good angle of the camera so that when they go on to the broadcast, it'll really have great impact, you know, because it's the largest broadcast audience ever, and, you know, up to that point ever, and all religions, all nations, everybody. I made my parents wake me up to see it, you know. I remember it very well, and so, but then there'll be this like this moment that you just stop, and for example, the first moment where they say like, "Do you see it? Do you see it?" and he doesn't answer, and then they say, "Frank." And then he answers and he goes, "Yes, it's beautiful," you know. And he had been sort of driving the thing, you know. He's the commander, and he didn't answer them, you know. And there's this, and so what's really great about that is that I didn't tell him those moments, but he found the exact same moments about like that line, that thing, you know, that just kind of, for me, you know, not saying. Merry Christmas and God bless you, but Merry Christmas and God bless all of you on this good earth, on that good earth. It's just, to me, that just, you know, and I just think you just captured it an extraordinary.
And so you only suggested the start with that text, and then the Boethius was your idea
And then
to do
that's why I
whatever.
say he saved the piece, because he got rid of all the bad stuff, and he put these fantastic Boethius pieces in that have, you know, all these references to the skies and the heavens, and grappling with being human beings and animals, and you know, I mean, it's really rich.
Well, it's so much fun when I set text because I'll know that I'll like something, but I don't know where those moments are going to fall. I really don't. Sometimes I know when I saw the "Oh Jesus," I thought, well, something's got to happen there, and I didn't know what it was going to be. But other things that were just surprised me, like right before they read the Genesis, they said, we have something we want to send to you, to all the good people on earth, we want to send to you. And I wanted to kind of blow through that because I wanted to get to the meat of it, to the Genesis reading. But then that send just kept coming back to me. So they land on that send, and I needed the sopranos to break off from all the halo stuff they were doing and just do this thing. I just felt this thing, and I thought, oh, send. And send. And when I wrote it, I went, whoa, like that. Because those moments, I didn't plan that. But that's the lovely thing about setting texts.
Surprised, yeah. And when you asked him to use this text, you were also at that point thinking that it was to pair with the Lang? Had you?
I asked him to write a piece to pair with the Lang.
And
I had been struggling. I've done it like six times before, and I can't find a piece to go with it. I've tried Wolfgang Riem. I've tried, you know, kind of Eschenwalds, you know, sort of lighter stuff. I tried all these different things, and I just go. I walk away and I go, good performances, but the journey didn't hold together. The whole evening just kind of didn't hold together. So I asked Kyle to write a piece that we could program with this using the same voices and the same instruments, and he pared those instruments down, as you see, to just the bass drum and the crotales.
And did it work?
You know, I think I love it.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the choir loves it. It's a challenging piece of music, and when you first look at it, you don't realize that, but there's a lot to sustain in it, and there's.
You're talking about the Lang now.
No, I'm talking about his piece. No, I'm talking about him with him in the room. So there's a lot to sustain in it, and there's these very, very high emotional points after a lot of static. And as you know, from your own from living your own lives, you know, very high emotional points need to be managed a little bit after a lot of static, and so it's really interesting to go through learning how to shape the piece with the singers to get that all to work.
One of the nice things about growing older and creating is that you learn things about yourself, and you learn what you're comfortable with and what you're not. But I was doing stuff in this piece that I had never been comfortable with before, so I guess it's also good to find those things and you get comfortable with stuff. For instance, like whole notes, like those sopranos holding notes. I really don't do that, and I really don't like to do that, and I don't, even in instrumental music, you know, they call them goose eggs, musicians call them. They're just holding a note and they're singing, and I really don't do that. I like to do counterpoint. I love to move voices. I love to move them all the time. And when I found out that I was doing this, creating this halo effect, and then later I flip it in the Genesis reading, the sopranos get to move, and the bottom three voices do that halo from below. I was thinking, really? Is this where you're going? And I went, and that's where I went. So,
well, you've written a lot of choral music. Yeah, because I mean, I sense that the voicings are very beautiful, and you can tell you've had a lot of experience.
Well, I've really grown in it because I used to write major chords with a major seventh on the bottom, and now I'm writing minor chords with a minor seventh on the bottom. So I think I've really gone into a new phase.
Sounds good. So maybe, does anybody have any questions for either of them? Don't be shy.
Don't leave us hanging.
Susie.
Thank you.
In a translation, you know, this may go back to Donald, and Vespers we did was in German and in Latin, but that was the project. They wanted to do a piece that was reflective of and inspired by the early Lutheran Reformation. So I used Lutheran chorales and stuff. So that's the way it's set. That's the way they would have sung Vespers back then in the bigger churches in German and Latin. And then we did another thing, the Paul Celan piece, Where Flames a Word, and Paul Celan, French poet. But I remember you saying really would love to do it in English.
No, I said I would not do it in anything other than English.
That's the way you said it. He said it like that. That's the way Donald would say it.
So I feel really strongly about this. Our singers are English speaking, and our audience is English speaking. So when we're going to invest in a new piece, it's going to be in English. And I just don't see any point to not do that. And so that's just a rule. And it works.
But what was nice serendipity about this was the very first section of mine, and it's a King, the translation paraphrase by King Alfred the Great, who many scholars think he is actually the one who did it, and it's really powerful. It's just like, to me, it's just like Beowulf. I don't know if that's in the notes or not, but it's got that same rhythmic structure and it's divided. And I just saw that and I thought, oh, this is wonderful. And then, of course, the big problem is throwing out all the stuff that there's just too much text, so you really have to whittle it down. So that's how that came about, and that's English.
So I should qualify that we do pieces that are written by other people in other languages at times, but when we're commissioning, it's English.
Sounds good. Yep.
I hope you're writing for the New York Times, right? No, darn it. Anyway, do send me the quote, nevertheless. We don't probably have time to go into like the whole philosophy of of how I approach diction in choral singing and particularly in English. But I will just point one thing out, which is that we sing much less legato than you might be aware of, and all of the little things that we add to our speech in order to make ourselves understood, like that little shadow vowel I just put at the end of understood, it is a part of the way we sing, but we don't explode anything. So we really work on just letting this speech be the speech, but not to spit anything, not to deliver it. So I'm glad to hear that it hit your ears in that way. For me, it's just a matter of just trying to be as honest as we can,
So tell me a little bit in terms of that about the lang, because the lang is so much about the text too. So it's in a sense made for you the things you were just saying.
Yeah. It is, and in some ways, it's pieces like that have helped me to. I don't really think about theory very much, or even really about rehearsal technique, as you know. But nevertheless, I mean, when asked about it, I think, oh, I wonder why that is, and it comes to mind. So a piece like the lang actually informs that and moves you toward a very specific way of delivering text, because you may have noticed that it sort of starts out over here in this kind of open fifth all the time, and da 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 da, and winds up over here in the sopranos up the octave over and over and over again. It's really difficult to sing.
The soprano. It's like
it just sits there. You just want to say, just go up a step for a minute. Just make a little tiny melody, So, but that's what the piece is, of course. That this kind of chant-like delivery is is the narrative, because as David says, the piece isn't about the suffering. It isn't about the little girl's story. He uses that as a vehicle to give us the context of human beings experiencing each other's suffering. To the value of appreciating someone else's suffering, essentially, is what that piece, where that piece began, and that's why the St. Matthew is there, and that's why the St. Matthew is there without Jesus, but the Hans Christian Andersen story is there with God, because that's mentioned many times, but it's all about recognizing the suffering in others. So that's why that just keeps going on and on and on that way, because it's really kind of a delivery of a vehicle in a way, a martyr. But yeah, you really you have to have your English chops going when you're doing that Lang piece.
There's one thing I noticed in the rehearsal of my piece earlier this week, that I think it's the third movement, where it's kind of a strophic thing. The music repeats and they go through verses, and at the very end, I split them. They've been singing four-part, and I split them up, and the basses come in all by themselves on an octave, and it's an exposed octave, and it's the first time that that's happened. And they come in, and there was something going on, kind of woogie about it, and Donald didn't make them sing it louder, he didn't make them sing it softer or something. He just changed something, and I was behind him, so I didn't really hear exactly what he said, but he had them do something with the vowels, and it just locked right in. And it was the same volume, it was anything, but all of a sudden it was like butter, and I went, wow.
But it is also is that these singers sing together a lot. As the Crossing has grown, the amount of singing that we do together has increased exponentially, and as a result of that, you kind of get used to what the person next to you is doing and how to either work with that or combat it, or just
Sure. It certainly sounds that way.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
kind of figure it out.
Maybe one last question? Anybody? Yeah. What was the word? A what effect? I'm sorry.
What Marin was doing.
Did you say ballad? Oh, babbling.
Oh, yes,
Sorry.
I know the movement. Yes, sorry.
I was like, I wish. It's the first movement and the third to last movement, in which there is in the first movement it's a tenor, and then that later movement it's an alto, and they shiver essentially. They sing the words that we're singing, and they just repeat it on the pitch, going, what, and it really, it's really interesting because the singers, they have a tendency to want to really romanticize that moment. They kind of want to go when, and you have to sort of go like, leave the audience their own space. This is about creating a space for them to experience their own emotion. David talks about this all the time, creating spaces for people to even wander off in their heads, because that one movement, the one you're talking about, no, it's the Lord have mercy. That Lord have mercy, God have mercy, it's God have mercy. It goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. There's something really mesmerizing, and there's an inevitability about it. There's a clock-likeness about it, which I'm so glad I got to say on this campus. There's a clock-like essence to it, and all this kind of stuff, but it does go on and on and on, and he intends that you're going to eventually kind of drift away a little bit, to your own need for mercy, or your own whoever you're dealing with. So that piece, you have to kind of get everybody to settle down and sort of do the text that's just the text that's on the page. But I think it's very effective.
Great. Well, thanks so much for a great concert.
Thank
all
you for
coming.
inviting us.
Thank you.